And at times, why do we forget the character of somebody just because he has donned a suit, gone to church, cried before the pastor? Then you think that that person has now repented sufficiently to forget the bad ways of the past.
He's now a saint.
He's now a saint. And I don't know why we create saints in this town when sainthood is supposed to be the preserve of the divine providence. Yeah. And, my brother, the president of this republic, William Ruto, had a novel way of saying bottom up.
Sure.
But you see, he never convinced me, and I'm yet to be convinced. How do you move? Because you see, as you move from the bottom, you also need to take care of the people in the middle. Because the really drivers of economy in a country like ours are the middle class. And the middle class and the lower middle class, because these are people with dispensable income.
Sure.
Who, you know, a secondary school teacher, primary school teacher, when they get their salary, within 3 weeks, within 2 weeks or 1 week, the salary has gone back to the bank. Which means these are people, when you make them happy, they will spend and the money will be in circulation. Kibaki was not a wheeler dealer. He was not a businessman. And Kenyans, as long as you are electing wheeler dealers because of the lagis they give you and the hopes they paint in the atmosphere, you are likely to be in the same hole for many years to come.
And you're just in time for Business Glide, your go-to point on matters, public policy analysis, business and economics at large, hosted by yours truly, Richard Mwenja. Indeed, it is always an honor to have you on board, especially this time where we are about to celebrate Christmas and the new year. It is truly an honor to still have you on board throughout the year and to this particular juncture. Now with me today to discuss a plethora of issues in the world of economy is none other than former cabinet minister and a seasoned thought leader here in the country, Kipruto Arap Kirwa. Welcome on board, sir.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure, Richard. And I want to wish all Kenyans Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year 2024.
That's a good one.
That economic situation will improve.
Very well. Former minister,
yeah.
Let's go straight into it. And if you look at the just released TIFA polls, the bigger part of the conclusion was that Kenyans, majority of them are saying they are at a worse place than they were last year before Ruto came into office. And the president during the Jamhuri celebration, the reason concluded one saying Kenya is now stable and there is no reason for panic, a message that was endorsed by Rigathi Gachagua, his deputy. Would you somewhat say that maybe this is a government that does not listen to the people? Because if the ground has said we are worse than where we were 1 year ago, but you are saying a complete message, can the president be trusted to paint the true picture of the state of the nation?
Well, perhaps the president is talking about the fundamentals of economy, the macro. And if he's talking about the macro, the people of Kenya are still waiting for trickle down so that they feel the impact of those changes.
Very well.
He has suggested. Number two, it's also very interesting, Richard, that while the president and his deputy are saying things are okay, what we're getting from Treasury is a different story. They are telling us the situation is not as good. And we're also feeling that if the salary is not going to be paid, if pension is going to be delayed, if pending bills is still both nationally and at county level is about 800 billion shillings, it tells you that the economy is a bit slow. Because, pending bills, essentially, the moment they are retired, the money gets back to Treasury,
Sure.
a certain proportion of that money. So at times you can slow the economy by not releasing pending bills, and you are also creating problems for the people of Kenya. If I'm a contractor, which I'm not, or supplier of certain services, and I've not been paid, and I used a loan from the bank, it means the bank will be pursuing me, and the interest and penalties and the foreclosures are going to devastate the economy. Because you see, usually GDP, as you know,
Sure.
is the sum total of all the services and the goods transacted in one calendar year within the boundaries of Kenya. Of course, there is some GDP that arises out of external factors.
True.
So, in essence, the moment you frustrate a single individual in that line, you are frustrating the overall economic growth. So, this is the message I think the president, yes, may want to paint a rosy picture, but I'm still worried because the debt is going up. GDP ratio, as you know, is 72%, debt GDP ratio. We are still borrowing. And even without borrowing, the dollar, for every unit it does, we are likely to incur an extra debt without borrowing of about 45 billion.
Sure.
So it tells you, if the dollar is going to about, let's say, 180, the debt ratio will shoot over through the ceiling. So it worries me as a Kenyan, it worries me as a taxpayer.
Very well.
It worries me as a little investor within the boundaries of Kenya.
True. Let's advance that conversation. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has actually called Kenyans up upon the release of the T4 polls and said, ignore the opinion polls. The hustlers are happy with Ruto's leadership. From where you sit as a footnote, do you consider Rigathi Gachagua to not have the wherewithal to tell the king that he is naked?
Well, Rigathi Gachagua possibly wants to protect his job, which is also okay. It is allowed for somebody to protect his job. But you see, you cannot bury your head in the sun for too long. Go to Shokimau today in the afternoon.
Sure.
Go to anywhere in some of these shopping centers. Our boys and girls who have been operating motorcycles are now playing bull, which tells you they are idle. And even some of the contractors, because they have not been paid, they are also playing pool. So at the end of the day, when you realize there are many people who are idle in certain strategic points, it tells you the economy is not growing. Economy is not a miracle. It is what you do, what I do, what everybody does in their small way that you get a cumulative effect nationally. Yeah.
Very well. And now that you've mentioned about unemployment and many youth turning into maybe alcoholism and out of desperation, gambling heavily, you've been an agriculture minister, and one of the books has reviewed you as a minister with a deep passion for agriculture. You were there when you turned around the maize crisis situation, the sugar crisis in this country, and also the penetration of other agricultural services. For this particular government, if it wants to tap into agriculture as an avenue to address unemployment, income for households, and also food security concern, that journey, where can they start from? Because they have tried with subsidized fertilizer, it has spectacularly failed. They have tried to address the sugar crisis, even privatization of some of the sectors. It is not working. So where does that journey start from?
The journey starts by being realistic. Realistic in the sense that for every investment you do in the agriculture sector, it directly contributes 27% directly, and through other linkages about 23. So effectively this country is still agriculture based. And the president in his manifesto was very clear. He talked about subsidy of fertilizer, but subsidy must be sufficient to dampen the prices that are there in the open market. But if subsidy is not dampening the prices in the open market, then it is not doing the miracle it ought to do. You go to any center today, the retailers are selling fertilizer at 6,000. So 2,500 is just for selected few. Now, the second issue is that for you to complete that chain, you must think from production to marketing. Because you see, once you improve productivity, you must also try to look for post-harvest handling. Because some of the crops, if they are not handled very well upon harvesting, they are perishable. Maize, for example, post-harvest losses comprise between 25 and 35%. And you would have expected this year the government should have been able to mop the excess maize in the market and allow National Cereals and Produce Board to store it. And if they don't have money, if there's no money, you put it under what we call warehouse receipting. Why do I say that? You will be able to store that maize in better condition, and if, let's say, I come in March or April next year and I need my 100 bags of maize, you'll be able to release to me, then I can take to the market. In that way, you are assisting to stabilize food flow within the market. The other issue when it comes to food security is food safety. Food safety is a very important component of food security, in the sense that the definition internationally by FAO is that food security is accessibility, in affordability, sustainability, and safety. So you must access food, you must afford to access, and that food must be safe for human consumption. Sure. So any of the components missing means you are not addressing the issue of food security. I say so because we have this edible oil that was not good. Later on, it was given clean bill of health. We had the sugar laced with mercury.
And other metals.
Yes, and they disappeared later on. Well, they were supposed to be in certain stores in Thika. Later on, the stores were empty. What happened? I don't know. So these are some of the issues, Richard, that really you don't have to be a supporter or an opposer of this administration. We are just telling them because it makes logical sense. It does not need a lot of intelligence. It is common sense.
Very well.
Yeah.
Still, on your tenure as the agriculture minister, you experienced this huge menace, which was drought, that really struck the assaults, the counties in the semi-arid and arid lands. But there's a way you turned around the situation for their betterment. Yeah. Looking at our heavy reliance on donor support, anytime we have the drought cycles, we have food crisis in the northern part of Kenya and even other counties. How then do we move away and build resilience within ourselves and go low on depending so much on the exchequer and also external support?
Well, there are a number of factors. The agriculture story for me is something, it's an area, as you said, I'm very passionate about. Not because of the GDP growth alone, but because it is important for your people to eat clean food and also to have enough, and the same with nutritional value that is adequate, so that we take children to school who are capable, they are not malnourished in any way. You know, you can be okay health-wise, but you do not have basic ingredients within your system. And as the people who do nutrition say, you are as good as what you eat. Now, we had a drought in Kenya, and we realized a number of challenges. One, we sensed there was, because there is what they call early warning system, engineered by IGAD, and they provide us with information in good time. So when we got the information, we assisted the livestock farmers to do what we call off-take. Off-take means you buy from the farmer at reasonable price before the drought ravages the animals.
Off-take programs.
Off-take program. Now, number two, we realized when we give maize to some of the farmers in some of these livestock areas, they will feed their livestock because they feel their livestock is so important that the children may go without food just to feed the animals. So what did we do? We went to ADC and other organizations to purchase hay for purposes of feeding livestock. In that way, we are able to mitigate some of the challenges such that the farmers don't lose animals when they are emaciated. So that you do off-take with animals that is still got some basic value for you to sell to the market. Because if you wait until an animal that had 150 kilos comes down to 38 kilos, it is no longer useful for any economic purposes. So what we did was to slow down the ravaging drought and at the same time provide the market for the livestock.
Very well.
What was the philosophy there? So that when the rains come, farmers have some little money to restock their livestock. Somebody who might have sold about 50 of them may start by restocking 10 or 20, then they continue, and within 1 or 2 years, they will have recovered almost of their original state, which is the basic principle of insurance. Insurance intends to restore you to the situation you are in before the event that devastated you
Principle
happened.
of indemnity.
Yeah, indemnity, yes.
Very well.
Yes.
Very well.
That's the way it is. It is simple. It is application of some of the principles we learn in school.
Very well. Rightly put there, sir. Yeah. And still looking on matters on how better we can improve the welfare of taxpayers and citizens at large, We are looking at some sectors which have a huge potential to turn around the fortunes of the country, say blue economy. And if you look at our coastal setup, if you look at the poverty index in Kilifi County, in Lamu, in Kwale, it is very much alarming. In Mombasa, we're still grappling with the issue of not tourism, but sex tourism at this time, 60 years after independence. Are you cognizant to the fact that we are yet to tap into the full potential of some of our sectors that can really be the silver bullet to some of our problems?
Yeah, you know, Richard, there are two ways that somebody can look at this country in terms of economic growth. We need to think macro, and therefore the institutions of government ought to open up infrastructure to provide for that macro assistance or enhancement. Then we need to think of micro. What does the household derive from this? So that when you have an agenda that you want to improve the people of coast, you are able to think from macro to micro, so that you see how do you interface the micro and the macro, so that it has social economic transformation
and the
to the people effect. And the trickle-down effect. And my brother, the president of this republic, William Ruto, had a novel way of saying bottom up. But you see, he never convinced me, and I'm yet to be convinced. How do you move? Because you see, as you move from the bottom, you also need to take care of the people in the middle, because the really drivers of economy in a country like ours are the middle class, and the middle class and the lower middle class, because these are people with dispensable income. Who, you know, a secondary school teacher, primary school teacher, when they get their salary, within 3 weeks, within 2 weeks or 1 week, the salary has gone back to the bank. Which means these are people, when you make them happy, they will spend and the money will be in circulation. I don't have to take you back to your economic class. But the truth is, as long as you are not addressing the mama mboga, the wheelbarrow guy, and the boda
or the
fisherman at the coast, you are not assisting this country to have the net effect of creating a transformative agenda. Some of the individuals and some of the international companies that come here, they come mine and they take back to their country of origin whatever they have mined in Africa. And this is not anything. There is a book, I think next time I should give it to you. About the missing billions in Angola. Whatever is happening in DRC. Whatever is happening in all African countries. And they basically say, for every $1 that comes to Africa, $7 live within the same year.
Nothing to do with a big brother watching the younger sibling in Africa?
No. It is just coming to exploit us. You see, the history of this continent is very interesting. There is a period of slave trade, which ravaged Africa for so long. After slave trade, people stopped slave trade under the guise that they were coming to salvage us. So the missionary came, and the missionary came very closely with the administrator, and that administrator now came to take care of certain conclaves within Africa. You remember the Berlin Conference, apportioning of Africa. So from slave trade, we did not rest. Immediately we had colonization. We in Kenya, we had it for 70 years, where most of the fertile lands, right here from Kiambu, all the way to Uasin-Gishu, all the way to Trans Nzoia, and parts of Meru in Timau, all those fertile lands were taken over by the Mzungus. And the Africans were squeezed, like in Kiambu. They were squeezed to Kidunguri, almost the hilly parts of Kidunguri. All these lower parts of Sianda were all the way to Tigoni in Limuru. They were taken over by the Mzungu. Now, the resources that were accrued out of that transaction went back to England or wherever those guys came from, because some of them came from the Dutch, most of them were British, and they midwifed that process, and they took away what belonged to Africa, including even our artifacts, including even the head of Koitalel Samoei. Yes, including the fact that we don't know where Kimathi was buried. People say it was in Kamiti. Nobody knows where the grave is. So as a people, we must unshackle ourselves from the bondage of colonialism. Because one of my daughters was telling me that it seems, listening to the rest of Africa, it seems colonization succeeded in Kenya, in the sense that even as we are today, we are still going back to IMF and World Bank, and we become the hostage. Because, I want you in any of the programs to tell me which country succeeded because of World Bank and IMF. This is something that worries me. And history can never be wrong. Yeah, because you see, the lending rate to us is different from what they lend to Europe. The lending rate to America is different from one they lend to Burkina Faso.
Or Ghana.
Or Ghana, for that matter. And the events are very clear there.
The writing is on the wall.
On the wall.
Very well. Yeah. Before we come to the tail end of this conversation, you've mentioned of the World Bank, you've mentioned of unshackling ourselves from the shackles of doom. And the World Bank made a report the other day, a fortnight ago, about Kibaki having been the best chief executive of this country. And if you look many years after Kibaki exited office, we've gone back to the shackles of unemployment, of alarming poverty, the shackles of hopelessness among taxpayers and citizens at large. You were part of his cabinet. What element in Kibaki would you say is missing in his successors, and more importantly, to narrow down to William Ruto, that he should maybe tap into to revitalize the fortunes of Kenya?
There are a number of critical points. One, Kibaki allowed us to make mistakes and correct our own mistakes as ministers.
Sure.
And therefore, we were in charge of our ministries. And the officers in the ministry, I've said before, are well trained. Whichever ministry, whether it's Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Agriculture, Office of the President, they are well trained and they have the requisite experience.
Meritocracy.
Yeah, meritocracy. What is needed by any minister is to spend time to understand the ministry, to spend time to almost see the dynamics within the ministry and provide the leadership. The ministers are not managers. They are supposed to be leaders. And when you are a leader, you tap into the potential of each person and you multiply yourself through the capacity of that particular individual. That is the way I look at it. Kibaki allowed us to do that. The second issue, Kibaki was not a wheeler dealer. He was not a businessman. And Kenyans, as long as you are electing wheeler dealers because of the lagis they give you and the hopes they paint in the atmosphere, you are likely to be in the same hole for many years to come. The worst thing to happen to any country is to elect somebody who calls himself a politician, but he is a businessman. And at times, why do we forget the character of somebody just because he has donned a suit, gone to church, cried before the pastor? Then you think that that person has now repented sufficiently to forget the bad ways of the past.
He's now a saint.
He's now a saint. And I don't know why we create saints in this town when sainthood is supposed to be the preserve of the divine providence. Yeah.
Very well, but it's a government of God, they said so.
Well,
selected by God and chosen by God.
Well, the songs were done in Bomas, Chini, but I don't know. God is there, and the jury is outside.
It remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Very well, sir. And that particular point by Kipruto Arap, Kirwa takes us to the wrap of this conversation. We've been talking a plethora of issues in the world of economy, taking concern with unemployment issue in this country, the alarming poverty levels, and also the recent report by the World Bank, which literally placed the late Mwai Kibaki as the best chief executive officer of this country to have ever existed, I should say, many years after independence. That has been our conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in. And at this juncture, allow me to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. And maybe Kipruto Rapkiro has a message for you all as you go through Christmas. Talk to your people, sir.
Yeah, Kenyans, I wish you well, and I know, there is possibly light at the end of the tunnel. Let's pray for this administration of William Ruto, for them to realize that everybody has a role to play in terms of economic growth.
Very well, asante sana. Until next time, do have yourself a very, very good festive season.